Welcome to On the Ballot with Ballotpedia, where we connect people to politics by providing neutral, nonpartisan, and reliable information on our government, how it works, and where it's headed.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this episode of On the Ballot. I'm your host, Norm Leahy, a senior editor here at Ballotpedia. And one of the things that we try to cover closely on the website and in our newsletters are ballot initiatives. And there happens to be a rather unusual and potentially significant campaign underway right now in California called Proposition 50 that deals with congressional redistricting. There are lots of moving parts to this story, and to help us make sense of it and get a feel for what's happening on the ground is Maya C. Miller. She's a political reporter at the nonpartisan and nonprofit newsroom CalMatters. And I know it's still morning where you are, Maya, so welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I said that there's a lot of moving parts to the Prop 50 story, and it's good. There's going to be a proposition on the ballot this November. And
in an off year.
In an off year, unusual, and voters are going to be asked to do what?
Oh, boy. So voters are going to be, so Proposition 50 is the result of this almost summer-long campaign from Governor Gavin Newsom of California, who has kind of positioned himself as the Trump foil, the one who's the Democrat who's going to stand up and fight back and use kind of the almost absurdist communication style that the president likes to use himself. And this Prop 50 is really his baby. It's a result of this campaign to counteract or combat this, mid-decade redistricting effort in red states like Texas and Florida and others. President Trump basically proclaimed that he was entitled to new gerrymandered Republican seats in order to shore up the House Republicans' fragile hold on power. And, if precedent holds and Democrats were to have a blue wave election in 2026, that would pretty much spell the end of universal Republican control in Washington and would make the last 2 years of his presidency probably quite frustrating and painful. So in service of trying to keep hold of the Republican trifecta, the president is trying to do these mid-decade redistricting efforts in red states to add more Republican seats. And then Governor Newsom and California Democrats were like, hey, we need to do something. We can't just stand by and let this happen. So we have Prop 50. The journey to get Prop 50 on a special election ballot is a long one. First of all, you need a special election because there's not a statewide election usually taking place in November of an odd year. So to do that, and to do that on such a compressed timeline, the governor needed a set of bills to go through the legislature to waive some of the deadlines that they've missed, to be able to give him permission to declare said special election, and then also define what is the proposition that's going to be on that ballot. And they just came out with the language a few days ago, or kind of the official summary of what's going on the ballot. And I can tell you word for word, Proposition 50 authorizes temporary changes to congressional district maps in response to Texas's partisan redistricting legislative. It's a legislative constitutional amendment, meaning the legislature put this on the ballot, and voters will be asked to weigh in on whether or not they approve of basically suspending the independent redistricting commission that California has. So California's legislature does not draw the congressional maps. They are drawn by a group of citizens on this independent redistricting commission. And then every 10 years. And that was a change that was made in 2008 and 2010 by good governance groups who were basically saying that the legislature was drawing sweetheart deals for their own.
Yeah.
And so voters will be asked to temporarily suspend those maps and instead approve the use of these partisan-drawn, gerrymandered, pro-Democrat maps for the next 3 election cycles as a way, Democrats say, to combat these partisan redistricting efforts in states like Texas and Florida.
Well, and you said that voters are the ones who created the Redistricting Commission back in 2008, and they said they give it a stamp of approval yet again in 2010. So what Newsom and Democrats in the state legislature are essentially asking is for voters to suspend the rules that the voters themselves set, correct?
That's right.
And how popular is this? What's the polling data show on this?
Definitely there is this is a tough ask for sure. The Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies poll came out in late August, shows that really only not even half of California's likeliest voters are in favor of approving this Proposition 50. Only 48% said that they would be in favor of it. 32% said that it would be they would vote no. And then a sizable portion of the population, 20%, are undecided. So, I mean, I think that just goes to show how much work the yes on Prop 50 side has to do to, convince some of those undecided folks and maybe even sway some of the no folks to their side. And, I'm not sure how kind of widely known this ballot proposition logic is, but in California, a yes vote on a ballot prop is generally understood to be much harder to get than a no vote. A voter's default is to stick to the status quo, say no, like be skeptical.
Right. That applies elsewhere too. It's always easier to say no than to say yes, because what am I getting into again? But it's interesting because the campaign is already underway. That
Yes.
We've started to see the campaigns for and against this thing come together, and we've seen some 7-figure and more checks being written, at least to maintain the commission. Tell us about how the yes and no camps are sizing up here.
Yeah. So already there's been millions of dollars pledged on both sides of this yes and no on Prop 50. On the pro side, you have obviously Governor Newsom, who has his own basically ballot measure spending account to be able to advocate for or against propositions. You have money coming in from the House Democrats campaign arm and the independent expenditure aligned folks kind of on the Democrat side. You have House Majority PAC who flood the airwaves with pro-democratic, anti-Republican ads every cycle. And then interestingly, on the no side, you kind of have these two parallel camps that are, at least in my early assessment, are trying to divide and conquer a very diverse audience of folks who they think could potentially, align to be opposed to Prop 50. So you have folks like the former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and the former chair of the Republican Party aligning to basically go after conservative voters and go after them with messaging and try to say, hey, this is a power grab by Governor Newsom and state Democrats, like don't let them do this. And then you have kind of at the same time this group that's supported by former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was a big proponent of the Citizens Redistricting Commission back in 2008 and 2010. You have Charles Munger Jr., who was also a huge funder of the effort to create a Citizens Redistricting Commission. Those folks are more of the good governance groups and trying to go after this really diverse coalition of yes conservatives, yes independents, but also even some Democrats who are hesitant to set aside this more democratic way of drawing maps. And so not necessarily taking a strictly partisan tact with their messaging as as the maybe more Republican aligned or conservative groups are trying to do. So you have a really interesting mix of kind of odd bedfellows that are trying to navigate how to keep this pretty fragile coalition together. And I think it's really just a question of who's going to have more momentum going into November. Like, is the desire to have almost a referendum on the Trump presidency and on Republican Washington, like, is that going to drive enough Democrats to turn out and vote yes and convince enough of the skeptics who are like, oh, this seems kind of anti-democracy, is that going to convince enough people to vote yes on this? Or is the no side going to have that inherent advantage? And is there, just no matter how much momentum they can produce, are there enough people who are skeptical enough to say, hey, this seems like kind of a bad idea?
Right. And I guess the key is it is an odd year of an election. Mm-hmm. And combine that with the other elements that you've got there. And it looks, at least at this moment, we need to be clear that we're talking about just a snapshot in time right now. And mm-hmm. every day between now and election day is a lifetime in politics. Yes. So there's a lot that can happen between now and then, but let's do something that is also dangerous in politics, and let's look to the future and think that if voters decide, okay, fine, we're going to go with this, the intention is to create more democratic districts than there are right now. First, is that a risk that voters might not do this because of the way California runs its primary system? And two, if it is successful and there are more Democrats, doesn't California run the risk that all of these new members are not going to want to go back to the Citizen Commission in 2030 when the temporary conditions have changed?
Absolutely. I think that those are all questions and concerns that the no side is trying to get voters to think about, and really, like, they can say that this is temporary and they can have this noble, we're only putting this aside to meet the moment, and desperate times call for desperate measures. And yet, when we find ourselves in 2030, 2031, what guarantee is there that the Citizens Redistricting Commission will still have standing? People will still be in favor of keeping this institution around. So I guess, to answer the question about what would these districts look like if voters were to approve the maps, I think that definitely the goal of drawing these maps was to turn 5 Republican leaning districts into more either safe Democratic seats or lean Democratic seats. So knock off 5 incumbent Republicans and then shore up a number of vulnerable Democrats as well. So when we're talking about vulnerable Democrats, we'd think about Derek Tran down in Orange County, Dave Min in Orange County, Adam Gray in the Valley, Josh Harder even. And so I think that and you also mentioned the way that California does primaries. There's not a Democratic primary or Republican primary. It's just open primary, and top 2 get on the ballot in the fall. But I think that the real question here is less of, does the primary system risk not giving Democrats the outcome that they want, and more of like, okay, can we actually guarantee that these 5 incumbent Republicans that they're saying that they're drawing into more Democratic leaning seats, like my question is, okay, for David Valadao, for instance, he's someone that they've been trying to knock off for many cycles. And the only time they were successful is 2018 with that big blue wave, the first referendum on the Trump administration. And the man has overcome, voter registration disparities between, having way more registered Democrats in his district than Republicans. And yet that still hasn't produced a win for the Democrats. So there's this question of, okay, you can draw however many more Democrats into a seat as you want, yet that doesn't guarantee that seat's going to flip Democratic. You've got to get those voters out, and you've got to tell those, understand that a Valley Democrat is different than a Bay Area Democrat, is different than an LA Democrat. So I think what I'm going to be watching for is, can they really count on that seat in particular, the Valadao seat, to be a notch in their win column?
Because, and the bottom line always in every election isn't what do the lines look like, it's who shows up on election day. And I think that will always be the case, no matter what the worthies in Sacramento, Austin, you take your pick, decided to. I know it's you've still got a big day of reporting ahead of you, and this is a developing story, as we say. So I'm sure that between now and election day, we'll be in touch again. And,
please do.
Yeah. So I appreciate you very much joining us here today, Maya Miller from CalMatters, and please check out the website. They cover everything you want to know about California politics, soup to nuts and everything in between. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I just want to let everybody know that you can find out about Prop 50, redistricting, what's going on in other states in the show notes, and that we'll be back with another episode of On the Ballot. Until then, I'm Norm Leahy, your host, and I will see you in the digital pages of Ballotpedia. Take care.